At the end of the day, passing from half guard is all about extracting the leg that's trapped inside your opponent's legs. But a really interesting question to ask, and a very important question to ask, is what exactly should I be doing with my free leg? What should that be doing? Because there's a bunch of different options, and some of them are better than others. So let's look at a situation where Mateus has my right leg trapped. Ultimately, I've got to free my right leg. That's the one that's trapped between his legs. But a really important question here is, well, what should I be doing with my left leg to set up the extraction of my right? You've got a bunch of good options here. One really good option is for me to use my knee as a wedge right here at my training partner's hip. Okay? One of the first things I like to do when I work in this position is to eliminate space around my opponent's hip. Because the more space there is, the easier it is for my opponent to hit an elbow escape, and from here put me back in guard. So the first thing I like to do, once I've trapped my training partner's leg, is to maximize my use of the knee and put it in right here. So when Mateus goes to elbow escape, it's very, very difficult indeed. That forms a very, very effective wedge. Okay. Now, when I work with my upper body grips, look how I turn my knee in on my opponent like so. I don't want to turn in so far that Mateus could just jump up on top of me and cause problems. That's not the idea. So once I turn in on my training partner, I want to make sure that my body is pressing across to the other side. Okay? I can't just be hanging back and Mateus just bridges into me and takes me over. So here I have good base. If Mateus bridges into me, I'm strong, but I haven't done anything to shut down the elbow escape. He goes to elbow escape and puts me back in guard. So there's a bit of a game here. I have, the wider my base, the less vulnerable I am to bridging, but the more vulnerable I am to an elbow escape. The narrower my base, the less vulnerable I am to an elbow escape, but the more vulnerable I am to bridging. So we have to play these two off against each other. So what I like to do is take my knee in, just like so, and then I walk my feet out so that I have a base of support behind me. Notice that I don't just sit on my shoelaces, where if Mateus turned into me, I'm going to fall very easily. Rather, what we do is we block the elbow escape with knee position, we pull the feet in, just like so, and then we bring our head all the way across the shoulder. If my head is in the center of his chest and he bridges, for sure I'm going to fall. So we turn out like so, and head comes down. Now when he goes into bridge, it's very, very difficult. The other thing I like to do is I like to take my knees off the mat. If I turn my knee in and my knees are on the floor, any small bridge on his part, and my buttocks touch the floor. So what we do is we turn in, and then I take my knees off the mat. Now when he goes to turn in, it feels very, very difficult. This also makes it very easy for me to get my shoelaces inside, or even better, the ball of the foot. And now we can separate his legs, cut across, and then from here, zigzag to the mat. So this is a really good way for you to understand what the dilemma for my free leg is. Again, the wider my base, the more stable I am, but the easier it is for Mateus to elbow escape. The more I pinch in, the harder it is for him to elbow escape, but the easier to bridge me over. The compromise that we work with is to pinch our knees to shut down the elbow escape, but take our knees off the mat and get our head pushing across the body to the far side. And that will be the ideal of both shutting down the elbow escape and the bridge at the same time. So let's have a look at this again. Okay, we've got an opponent who has good escapes on bottom. He's got a great bridge and a great elbow escape. We go in and lock up. From here, the knee tucks into the pocket of the hip. Again, here I'm very stable, but very vulnerable to an elbow escape. Here, I shut down the elbow escape. I pull my feet back and I go into the balls of my foot. Now, I take my knees off the mat and head towards the floor. So when Mateus goes to bridge into me, it's quite difficult. Then from here, I come up, I put my foot in the inside so I can separate his half guard, cut across, and then zigzag through, get that precious inside knee wedge, and then from here, finish with a nice pass. This is one excellent way in which we can maximize the use of the free leg to suit our purposes. Now let's look at some other elements of maximizing the use of the free leg to suit our purposes for holding top position in half guard. Another really excellent way we can use our free leg is to create a wedging effect between the hip and the armpit and block off the near side of my opponent's torso. So when I first go in to my training partner's half guard, one really good way for us to operate is to bring our knee up to the armpit and then put our foot all the way in here at our training partner's hip. So when Mateus goes to elbow skate, it's hard for him even to get the elbow inside. When he tries to bring his knee up, it's blocked out by the sole of my foot. From Mateus's perspective, what he wants to do is form knee and elbow coming together. So if he can do that, he can shut me off here. That frame of knee and elbow, let's show me the knee and elbow, completely shuts down my ability to be effective here. Now he just hips out and puts me back and guard very easily. So that's Mateus's goal. It's always to link up knee and elbow and hit a nice elbow escape. Okay. So if I could put my foot in here as a wedge and stop the knee coming forward, and put my knee inside of his elbow at the armpit, that would shut down a big part of his game. So one of the first things I like to do in situations like this is to go in like so, and then just place the sole of my foot right there on the inside. Second foot comes up like so. Now when Mateus goes to move around the bottom, it's very difficult for him to be effective. And at any given moment, it's really easy for us just to turn our foot over the top and get the ball of our foot inside his calf muscle. Now from here, you probably guessed, we straighten out on the leg, and we zigzag across the hips and end up with a beautiful pass. So once again, we have an opponent here who we know has a good elbow escape. So rather than let him get his elbow inside my thigh, I keep everything out and I go inside up to the armpit. Now when Mateus goes to elbow escape, he's more or less shut down. At any given moment, it's pretty easy for us to pass our foot to the inside position. Now from here, we straighten out his leg, cut across, and pin. Now, another really good option with our free leg is to go into tripoding. Tripoding has some really significant advantages. It shuts down your opponent's ability to bridge and off-balance you with bridging. But you do have to be careful how you do it so you don't give your opponent an easy elbow escape. Okay, done well, tripoding from half guard can be a very, very good way to loosen up your opponent's grip on your trapped leg and make really good progress without the fear of being bridged over by an aggressive opponent. Okay, I'm sure you've all had that unpleasant experience of going with a guy on bottom who maybe isn't the most technical guy in the gym, but he's explosive and strong, and you do a good job of getting half guard, but you're just getting bucked around like a cork on the ocean just by strong bridging. So here you've done a good job of stuffing the leg, you come forward, you get good upper body grips, and this guy just goes full power bridge, boom, and you're like, oh no, I took him down, I got the half guard, I almost passed, and now I'm bottom half guard and he's chest to chest. So one good way for us to get around this is to start by turning our knee in, as we always do, and as Mateus goes to move around on bottom, we come up into a tripod, just like so. Forehead on the mat, and my buttocks up. Now, I'll just demonstrate something important here. When we go to tripod in half guard, we never go into a symmetrical tripod. I don't come up like so, with my hips and buttocks in a symmetrical position. What we want is an asymmetrical tripod, where one hip is down, one hip is higher, and my knees point towards his knees. That's where we want to be. So it's not like so, but rather like so. And it gives us an ability to walk across the mat. So, here's my opponent. I turn in and I take my 2 feet back to the hip line, okay? There's my opponent's hip line. I want my feet on the hip line. The more my feet are down by the knee line, the more Mateusz can bridge into me and cause problems. So what we do here is we take the feet back to the hip line. Now, even with feet on the hip line, if my opponent is an aggressive bridger, heavier than me, there's still a pretty good chance he'll knock you backwards. So what we want to do here is come up and get our forehead on the mat here. Now when he goes to bridge, there's nothing to bridge into. And as a result, it's very easy for us to get our foot inside and cut through into good position. I often make use of this kind of thing with aggressive bridges in bottom position. So once again, my opponent and I lock up, we turn in, then we come up and we get into that asymmetrical bridge. I'm going to ask Mateusz to try and keep the lock of his legs above my knee. And what you're going to see is it's actually damn difficult for Mateusz to do that, okay? Even without really doing anything to shake his leg off, it's quite difficult for Mateusz, under these circumstances, to stop my knee from coming free. Then we just put our shoelaces inside and we've freed our knee. When he goes to bridge into us, it's so hard. Remember, guys, what makes the bridge effective is that my opponent can touch his hips to my hips. When his hips bang into mine, that's when he takes me over. But if I'm tripoded, he can't touch his hips with he can't touch my hips with his. And so the bridge just doesn't really have the same impact. And then from here, we just put our foot inside, cut through, and pass. So this act of tripoding puts your opponent in a situation where it's very, very hard for him to generate the hip-to-hip contact, which makes bridging effective. On a plus side, and a negative side for Mateusz, is it also puts a tremendous amount of cross-face pressure on your opponent. It's pretty unpleasant for the person underneath. We often make use of this, both gi and no gi, to add some intensity into the crossface, make it very, very hard for a strong bridging opponent to bump us backwards. Now it's time for us to start getting into passing your opponent's half guard. Let's look at some specific techniques that are going to get us past some very tough half guards. Okay, now what makes a half guard tough? Okay, a big part of it is your opponent's ability to frame on your head and shoulders and start generating space. As they can generate space, they can start to get underhooks. As they get into underhooks, they become more and more threatening to you from the bottom position. And pretty soon you're fighting not to pass your opponent's guard, you're fighting not to get swept or submitted. And that's obviously not the direction you want to go. One truly great method of shutting down your opponent's defensive frames is a half karagatame. This works off the lapel crossface that we looked at earlier. From a beginning half guard situation where my right leg is trapped, we know the basic idea is always to free the knee of the trapped leg. Okay, something we want to consistently get into the habit of is taking our training partner's lapel out and from here looking to feed our hand through underneath and feed the lapel around the corner and work our way up into a good controlling grip here underneath our training partner's shoulder. Okay, don't be satisfied with just grabbing anywhere. Okay, the idea is to create maximal tension using your opponent's jacket, and the only way you can really do that is to make sure that your hand goes through so the thumb is underneath the shoulder, and we consistently look to work to bring everything around the corner and use the biting method to get my thumb inside my training partner's armpit. Okay, as long as your thumb is outside the armpit, you're never going to maximize your cross-face pressure with this move. So we're always looking to create a situation where I go around the corner and I consistently walk my hand up until my thumb goes into my training partner's armpit. Now you have an incredible ability to pull on your opponent's head and prevent his head moving away from you. When he tries to shrimp and move around, you can completely shut him down. Okay. Now, in terms of defensive frames, we will often see people using their hand in this kind of general position. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post inside my training partner's elbow, just using a V grip like so. And as a result, make a strong if you want to push on me. I can move away from my opponent's elbow and put my head down on the floor. I want to make sure that my head goes forward as far as possible. When Mateus goes to push me back, it's impossible for him to use his left hand effectively. All he can use is his right hand on my hip. And all I'm going to do in these situations is start to walk across my training partner's body. As I walk across the body, I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to take an inverted grip on my training partner's knee. I never put my hand like so on the knee. Now Mateus can use his right arm to reach around behind me and start catching a hold of my arm behind my back. You don't want that kind of thing happening. So we make sure we don't expose our elbow to him. We walk across his body. We point our knee at the ceiling, and as a result, from here, we get our knee down to the mat. Now Mateus only has a grip on my ankle. When he tries to move around from here, he's so bound up with the karagatame that I can take my time and exert tremendous control and positional pressure upon him. Now I'm going to rise up as he locks onto my ankle. I'm going to pommel my foot inside my training partner's thigh and put the ball of my foot inside my training partner's shin. As he tries to push me off, it's so easy for me now just to free my two legs, and we end up now in the mounted position with the karagatame in place. I'm sorry, Mateus, it was a very unpleasant move for the poor person on the bottom. I apologize. So here we are. We start off. We've got one arm underneath. My hand goes around, so my thumb goes to his armpit, and I use the lapel feed. I don't bring my hand to the lapel. I bring the lapel to my hand. Then we use the biting method to ensure that my thumb goes all the way through to my training partner's armpit. I bring his head in close. He forms a good defensive frame in like so. I post on the elbow like so. And I move my head. I don't move his arm. Realistically, you will not be able to push his arm. Rather, I move my head underneath. And I plant my head down on the floor. I turn my hips in on my training partner, and I start the action of walking across his center line so that his knees start pointing out in this direction. I place my hand in the inverted grip. If I just try to pull my knee straight out, lock on tight Mateus, it's not going to happen. So what I do is I turn my knee to point at his knee. My knee points at his. So he locks up. If my knee is pointing down at the floor, I'll never extract my leg. So what I do is I point my knee at his, and as a result, I can easily drive my knee down to the floor. As Mateus tries to hold me off from here, it's so difficult. I have a free hand that I use as a base of support. If he tries to bridge and move, etc., I feel very, very stable here. Now in one motion, I come up, I pommel my foot into the inside position. He tries to hold on to my ankle, and it's so difficult for him to prevent that turnout, and into the mounted position we go. Okay, it's going to show you from a different angle. So here we are, half guard situation. From here, my opponent comes up playing half guard. We go through. My arm goes as far through as possible, and we make a good feed to the lapel. We bring everything around the corner. He puts in a defensive frame. As always, from here, we get our head down to the floor. Now, as he tries to hold on tight to me, look how my hips turn inward. I can't be naive and let my opponent elbow escape and put me back in guard. So we always turn our knee in to our training partner's hip. I start walking across, and I put that inverted V grip in on my training partner. I point my knee at his knee. And as a result, I can easily get my knee down to the floor. From this position, look how I feed my foot inside my training partner's locked feet. And as a result, we can easily drive across and now find ourselves in the mounted position. This represents one of the absolute strongest methods of passing your opponent's half guard. The use of the half karagatame strongly shuts down your opponent's ability to effectively frame and work his way into good grips from bottom position. You'll deny their underhooks. You'll deny even an ability to just to push on the head and make things difficult for you. Anytime you can get this incredibly useful grip where we go through underneath and feed the hand across like this, so my hand is inside and underneath the shoulder. Don't be satisfied with the whole hand visible out here. If there's space between your hand and his back, you're not doing what you could be doing. So always, no space, my hand in contact with his, and the lock. Now, as we come around the corner, look how he forms a frame. We push, we get our head down, and from this position, we're ready to play. As I walk across the body, I expose the inside of the knee. I don't try to do this on one side of his center line. I walk everything across. Now from here, I put on the inverted grip. I point my knee at his knee. Make a lock. If I just try to pull my knee out, you get a strong guy, you'll never free the knee of the trapped leg. So our whole thing is to walk across, and then from here, I point my knee at his, and as a result we come out very, very easily. Because I have a hand on the floor, I'm very, very stable. When he tries to move me around, it's so difficult, and as a result we can easily level change up, pommel a foot inside, and then from here we find ourselves in a perfect position to settle down into the mount. Now we just looked at the half karagatame, one of the absolute most powerful methods of passing half guard. There's a reason why I showed it to you first, because it really is an intimidating and powerful method of passing even the toughest half guards in the world. At beginner level, it will garner very impressive results for you very quickly, I'm sure. Now, let's look at a situation where I cannot get the half karagatame. You get the grip on your opponent's lapel, you get the crossface with the lapel, but you can't get your head wedged underneath his arm. Okay, it's going to happen sometimes, so we've got to know what to do. Well, the good news is you've still got that lapel crossface, so you've still got a powerful weapon at your disposal. So, as always, we start off here in half guard as my opponent goes to work. We're always looking in these situations to take our training partner's his lapel out. Now, understand, guys, when you're going live in competition and in sparring, 9 times out of 10, your opponent's lapel just comes out organically, and so you don't have to sit up and take it out. But if you're right at the start of your first match or what have you, and the lapel is tucked in the belt, you will have to physically pull it out and manipulate it. But as I said, in actual competition, it's usually not an issue. It's normally come out organically by itself. Now, this time we go in on our training partner, and like before, we close off all the space and we bring the lapel around the corner. We use the biting method to set everything in place, like so. Okay? Let's understand that when we go to set the lapel, we can't make this beginner's mistake. I can't set the lapel with my knee out wide, because my opponent at any given time can just elbow skate and put me back in a full guard. So as we're making these adjustments, let's make sure our knee is always turned in towards our training partner's hip. There shouldn't be any space between my knee and his hip. Any space between my knee and his hip, and it's a simple elbow skate to put me back in guard. So we always want to close off that space. So my knee is in, set there at his hip. Now, we go in on our training partner and we lock up our grips in the manner that we saw previously, okay? Now, the beauty of this grip is that it lets me do with one hand what normally takes 2. Normally, in order to get control of my opponent's shoulder girdle, I have to lock my hands up in this position. It requires 2 of my hands to work like this. That means a sacrifice in my base. If my opponent puts 2 feet on the floor and then turns in this direction, he can take me out of balance. The beauty of using this lapel crossface is not only the extraordinary pressure that it can bring to bear on your opponent's head, but also the fact that it gives me a free hand as base of support, a free hand that can go on my training partner's legs to assist in guard passing. And the arm that was the underhook is simply replaced by his lapel, like so. So with one hand, I'm doing the work of 2 hands. That's the beauty of this grip. That's why we use it so often, okay? My opponent goes in to work here, or even with an underhook, a grip that most people believe is a very good grip for the man on bottom. When he goes to move me around, I'm based out and I feel strong in this position. We're going to walk across our training partner's body, and from here we're going to use exactly the same grip that we saw earlier, where I put the hand in the inverted position inside my knee. That closes my elbow to my ribs. I don't naively come in here where I expose my elbow to my opponent to reach around behind me and access my hand, cause all kinds of potential problems. So we come in just like so. I'm always looking to walk my opponent's knees in the direction of my pass, okay? If his knees are pointing this way, it's hard for me to pass in this direction. So what we always do in these situations, Loctite, is we start the action of walking across his body so that his knees point in the direction of my pass. Now I go inside my training partner's knee and watch how I point my knee at his. It's that action of pointing my knee at his that makes it come out so easily. I'm sure you've all had the unpleasant experience of someone who just locks on like a tiger onto your leg and you feel like, God damn it, there's no way I'm going to free that leg, okay? Whenever we feel this, we just walk across, we post, and we just point our knee at his knee, and it comes out so easily, okay? If I don't do that, and the guy locks up tight, you feel like you'll never free that knee. Just like an elbow escape from bottom position, extracting your leg is exactly the same principle. We just point our knee at his knee, and we get through very, very easily. Now from here, I put my knee on the floor in this position. Once my knee goes to the floor, now we can pass in different ways. At this point, I like to abandon the lapel crossface. I like to take my two hands out and put them in this position. Now, as my opponent tries to elbow escape and put me back in guard, I just put weight over the knee that he's trying to elbow escape on. And I put on a new crossface here, and I grab on this side. Now, I start driving across with that crossface. And as a result, I can easily turn out and end up in the mounted position. Let's have a look at that again. My opponent's here, working from bottom position. I go through and I take my hand in as an initial crossface. I get a hold of my training partner's lapel and feed it down to the floor. I go through and lock it up. Now, my opponent can have an underhook. He can have a forearm crossface. He can do whatever he wants. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I'll give him an underhook for now because many people believe this is a dominant thing for my opponent on bottom to have. Okay, my knee is turned in on his hip, and we start the action of walking so that we get his knees pointing in this direction. Now we put our hand inside his knee, and from here I point my knee at his knee, and as a result, I'm going to get my knee down to the floor next to his hip. Let's come around this way. Now, from here, I'm going to take my hand all the way through and grab the crossface on the opposite side. Now, as he locks on tight to my ankle, I'm going to focus on cross-facing in the opposite direction. And as a result, we easily bring our foot out and we find ourselves now in the mounted position. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate it with our hips and asses towards the camera. Apologies, but that way you'll be able to see the leg work a little more easily. So, from the situation, when Matthias has half guard and an underhook, we go through underneath and we start that action of feeding the lapel in. Now, knees turned in, I start walking across, and from here, look how my hand goes in. I point my knee at my training partner's knee, and as a result, I can get my knee down to the floor. I get a crossface on the opposite side, and now from this position, I put true crossface pressure on my training partner. And as a result, my feet come out of the trap, and we now find ourselves in the mounted position. This is an incredibly effective way to use crossface pressure. The first, reinforced with the lapel, the second, without. We pass first across our opponent's body and then come back, cross-facing in one direction, then the other, to extract and end up mounted. Now, we're going to go into one of the most foundational half-guard passes in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu. This is an interesting one because it works equally well with and without the gi. It requires that our hands be locked, so it has a crossface and an underhook. And it can, like the ones we've looked at so far, it's based around the idea of strong cross-face pressure. But instead of passing directly into the mount, typically, not always, but typically, we use this one to pass onto the near side of our opponent's body and complete a near side half guard pass. So let's have a look at the basic idea behind it. Our opponent has our right leg trapped. We know that as long as he's locked above my knee, he controls my leg. So at some point, we've got to free this knee of this trapped leg. We also know that our opponent wants everything on his part, head, hips and knees pointing towards me. That's going to give him his best options as far as attacking me from bottom go. For this particular move, I need to get underneath my training partner's arm. There's plenty of other guard passes where that's not necessary, but for this half guard pass, we need to be underneath our opponent's arm. Then we need a crossface on the opposite side, and our hands come in and we lock. Our first thing is to maximize our crossface pressure. There's a tendency that many people have to go straight to the crossface. Okay, Matthijs makes a strong body, and it's hard for me to get sufficient crossface pressure. What I'm going to recommend to you guys is that when we go to apply crossfaces out of this position, we use the chin-to-chin method, where I go chin to chin, like so, and then I go chin to shoulder, like so. And that zigzagging approach creates a very, very strong crossface pressure. It's hard for my opponent to stop. At the same time, you'll notice when I take this move, I always have my knee blocking here at my training partner's hip. Any space between my knee and his hip always creates elbow escape problems. So we always want our knee pinched inwards. Okay. So as my opponent goes to work in this position, look, I take my crossface, I lock up, I go chin to chin, and then chin to shoulder, and my knee turns inwards. My trapped foot comes back, so my 2 feet are relatively close together. Okay. As Matthijs goes to hold on tight to my leg and move around in this position, what I want to do is I want to start the action of tripoding. As I tripod, I come up like so, and you can see he now has to relock his legs above my knee. And it's not an easy thing to do. As he locks higher and higher on my leg, I'm going to use my shoelaces to go inside his knee, and we shake, 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 and bring our knee free. So when he locks his feet now, they're locked below my knee. Now I take my knee and I touch the floor so that he only has my ankle. As he holds on tight, tight, tight to my ankle, from here, we're going to practice the skill of taking our foot, the sole of our foot, and pointing our toes so he has less to hang on to. And we use a push on both top and bottom foot to start the action of going through. Once we go through, we avoid the temptation to come up and give him space to bring his knee back inside and put me back in guard. Rather, we walk back to our training partner's hips and pull him in with the crossface. Okay? I see this so often. People do a good job of clearing their leg, and they give their opponent access back to the guard by creating way too much space. Let's have a look at all this again. First, some general principles that are important to understanding how this guard pass works. Okay, first critical principle is always, and this applies to many half guard situations, I never want to give space between his hip and my free leg. Okay, he's got my right leg trapped. If there's any space between my left knee and his hip, that's space through which he can easily elbow escape. So in almost all half guard passes, not all, but a large number of them, one of our central concerns is closing off that space between my knee and my hip. Okay. Now when he goes to elbow escape, it's so much more difficult. Okay. So that's a basic element behind many half guard passes. Next key element. Once we go in and start controlling our training partner's head and we get that good crossface in place, I always want to get his lower body, his knees, moving and pointing in the same direction as my pass. Okay. I'm going to pass to my left-hand side. So look how I apply pressure. Hold on tight, baby. I apply pressure by walking to my left. And I get his knees pointing in the directions that I want. Then I put my shoelaces inside his knee and I free the knee of the trapped leg. Then I place my knee on the floor. That blocks his hip. So when he tries to, say for example, put me back in guard, he's blocked by my knee at his hip. And as a result, it's relatively easy for me to take the sole of my foot and push on through. I point my toes so that I escape more easily. Now the danger is that I will square up and give him a ton of space to put me back in guard. So instead of squaring up, I move back down his hips, like so. And as a result, we're in the perfect position. He tries to bring his knees back in, and he's blocked out. In my own time, I come up past the hip line and score my pass. Okay. Once again, from a different angle. he has a hold on my leg. We go through underneath and lock up. We get that good cross-face pressure that we're looking for. We close the space between my knee and his hip. And then from here, I start walking in the direction of the pass, tripoding up like so. I put my shoelaces inside and my knee comes down to the mat. As he tries to hold on to me in this position, it's so difficult. Now we get a hold, the sole of our foot on our training partner's foot. And from here, we get a good extraction and an excellent pass. I'm going to talk to you now about something that some of you may have heard when you hear me coaching my athletes in competition. Often when you see one of my athletes get to a half guard position, you'll hear me yelling from the sideline, shoelaces to sole. Shoelaces to sole. What the hell does that mean? Okay. Well, we free the knee of our trapped leg by using the shoelaces of our feet. Okay, the shoelaces of the feet. But I free my ankle by using the sole of my feet. Let's have a look at this. We know now that one of the founding principles of all half guard passes is the need to free the knee of the trapped leg. So my right leg is trapped. As long as Mateus controls my leg above the knee, he controls my whole leg. I can't tolerate that. So we need to free the knee of the trapped leg. Okay. We know that the way to do this is to use our shoelaces, where I come up, his legs are locked above my knee, and from here we start a walking action. Then I take the shoelaces of my left foot and I put them inside his knee. And as a result, I can shake, and bring his legs well below my knee. Now I put my knee on the floor, but I don't use my shoelaces now. I use the sole of my foot. I can use it on either one of his legs, often more than one. And from here, we start that action of pushing, and now we're in a position to pass. So initially, we use the shoelaces of the legs to free, the shoelaces of my feet to free the knee of my trapped leg. And then we use the sole of our foot to free our trapped ankle. Okay, so the shoelaces free your knee, and the sole of your foot frees your ankle. Using this simple sequence, you can complete many strong half guard passes. Now, let's look at a form of half guard passing which I personally favor a lot. This is head block guard passing. The reason I'm such a big advocate of this is because it gets us around one of the chief problems associated with cross-facing. We have a talented opponent in bottom position, and we've managed to secure an underhook. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if I lock my hands in this position, I'm going to cause extreme problems for my opponent. So what many of your opponents will do when they feel you've got an underhook is they will take their right hand and put it on your bicep. And as a result, you will not be able to lock your hands and form the top head and arm position that we saw in the previous move. You've got an underhook, but you don't have a crossface. That means I have no ability to stop my opponent moving his head in towards me and start causing all kinds of problems with elbow escapes, etc., etc. Okay? So when we work in these situations, and I feel my opponent has gotten inside position with his hand and I cannot form an effective crossface, I'm going to replace my crossface with a head block. The way I do this is I simply take my head and I block here so that my head replaces my crossface. Now, as Mateus goes to work in this situation, we can do a number of things to free the knee of our trapped leg. One of my favorites in this position is for me to go into a tripod. It's like so. From the tripod position, I take a thumb pose where I take my thumb and I put it right inside my training partner's knee. As Mateus holds on tight to my leg, I'm going to go into a shaking tripod. And as a result, I can free the knee of the trapped leg. Now from here, I put my knee on the floor. I now have a choice between either underhooking my opponent's arm or overhooking my opponent's arm. When he tries to hold on to my ankle, it's so difficult for him to prevent me taking the sole of my foot and from here, just pushing all the way through and into my guard pass. Now, I take my knee and I put it in his armpit. I take my second knee and touch my first knee. And as a result, it's very easy for me to bring my knees apart and settle into an excellent pin across my training partner's side. Once again, in a situation where my training partner has me in half guard and I manage to get the underhook on one side, but I cannot get the crossface on the other. I take my hand to his shoulder, I bring my head across to the other side, and now his head is caught between my head and my right underhook. As he locks on tight to my leg, I go into a tripod action just like so. From the tripod, I take my thumb, I put it right inside my training partner's knee. And from here, I shake as I push down on the knee and free the knee of my trapped leg. Remember, all of our half guard passes are founded on that principle of freeing the knee of the trapped leg. I put my knee on the floor next to his hip, and I go either under or over my training partner's arm. I place the sole of my foot right here on his knee, and I start the action of pushing. I point my toes and my trapped foot, so I come out quite easily. Now, I take my knee to his armpit. I bring my knee to my own knee. I lock my crossface and bring my knees apart to settle into a very strong pin. Once again, from half guard situation, my opponent blocks out my crossface arm. I bring my head down. I block with my head instead of the crossface. From here, I come up into a high tripod. He locks above my knee. We take our thumb, we go inside his knee, shake, and bring our knee down to the mat. From here, I can go either under or over. It doesn't matter. And as a result, we find ourselves in a perfect position to free the knee of the trapped leg. We come in knee to knee and end up across our training partner's side. This is an incredibly useful way for us to use our head to make up for a failure on our part to get that strong crossface that we typically use to pass our opponent's half guard. One of the strongest forms of half guard passing that incorporates many of the general principles that we've looked at is double underhook half guard passing. Many people are familiar with single far side underhook. Going underneath both of our opponent's arms creates an unusually strong control of our opponent's upper body and often greatly facilitates half guard passing. So we have an opponent who's down. Let's come on a second. And they have a half guard situation. We have the underhook just in like so. Typically, I will start off by getting a head block. So I will place my hand on the head and come in just like this. From this position, we start the action of tripoding. And as a result, we're able to get our thumb post inside our training partner's knee. Sometimes you will need to walk in this direction to expose the inside of their knee. And then from here, look how, as always, shake, and get our knee down to the mat. Once our knee is down on the floor, you can expect a lot of resistance from your opponent. Sometimes they will push on the knee, sometimes they'll push on the hip. What they're trying to do is stop your knee from driving through and completing the pass. Whenever we see this, we take our hand through underneath and start walking everything up north. You can, if you want, grip your training partner's collars. This provides a very, very strong grip indeed and represents an interesting and useful way to use the gi. You don't have to do this, however, because the position is so intrinsically strong that often it's enough just to hold on to your training partner's shoulders. Now, keeping my knee in place, he tries to hold me off. I flare my elbows and bring his arms out wide. So as he tries to push on my hips, etc., it's so hard for him to be effective. This pins both his shoulders to the mat and creates a very easy situation for us to take our free foot and from here start pushing and going out into a passing position. When he tries to put me back in guard, it's almost impossible because I'm underneath both of his arms. And as a result, we can easily walk around the corner and into a very strong and punishing pin across our training partner's side. So once again, we start off, half guard situation, my knees turned in. I managed to get in on that underhook. My opponent goes to hold me off. He's pushing, pushing, pushing. From here, we're going to post the head and put our head down just like so. So his head is now trapped between my head and my underhook. Now from here, we start the action of tripoding. I expose my training partner's knee by turning down in this direction and putting my thumb inside his knee. And as a result, we can easily get our knee down to the floor. Now I take a minute to stop. I place my hand through underneath, make a strong arm with this. I move my hand through underneath and lift and elevate. I have the choice between grabbing the lapels or just hugging onto my training partner's two shoulders. As Mateus goes to put me back in guard, it's a very difficult thing because he can't really access me with his upper body. As he tries to elbow escape, it's difficult because my knee is blocking his hip. And as a result, it becomes quite easy for us now to start that pushing action that we often do. Sometimes there's going to be strong resistance here and the opponent holds on like the devil himself. No problem. We focus here on just pushing, pulling, whatever it takes to get everything free. Now when he goes to put me back in guard, it's almost impossible because the upper body is shut out. And as a result, we end up in a beautiful pin across our opponent's side. This means of passing is one of my absolute favorites. It's one of the few methods of passing that completely locks your opponent's head and both shoulders to the mat. It completely shuts down his ability to move head and shoulders. And that's a big, big part of half guard passing. I'm just going to demonstrate it from the other angle. So we have a talented opponent in the bottom position. From here, I'm able to secure a far side underhook. My opponent knows now that if I get underneath his head, it's going to be a problem. So he blocks me out. Blocks me out. From here, I bring my head down. I go up into an initial tripod. I use my thumb inside his knee to free the knee of the trapped leg. And then from here, I pommel in and take double underhooks. From the double underhook situation, he goes to hold me off. And we take our time in this position. Eventually, I get a foot to a knee, then the other knee, working my way back and forth until the knee comes free. Now, lift, pull, and pin. A very, very strong and useful way of passing half guard situations. Now, if there's one central insight which is going to help you with your half guard passing game, it's this. There's a certain way of positioning your knee from chest to chest positions, which creates a wedging effect around your opponent's hips and shuts down his movement from bottom position. If you can combine this with control of your head so that the head is wedged by your arms and your opponent's hips are wedged by your knees, you're going to pass a lot of people's guards from half guard. Let's have a look at this. We know that when we're in the chest to chest position, we want some method of wedging the upper body. It might be with a crossface. It might be with our training partner's gi. It might be with my head position or double underhooks. However you choose to do it, you want to put some kind of strong set of wedges with your upper body around his head and shoulders. Now, that's one thing, taking care of the head and shoulders. The other thing we want to do is we want to use our knee, once we've freed it, and put it on the floor in either this great passing position, where my knee touches the mat. When my training partner goes to move his hips around now, there's a lot of pressure controlling him. When we combine this with upper body control, the only thing he can hold on to is my ankle. And when he goes to move around, my knee wedges the hip and my upper body grips wedge the head and shoulders. This makes it so easy to just perform the final act of freeing the ankle and passing. So that's one kind of knee wedge that we work with. The other occurs on the other side. This is in situations where I move across my training partner's body, I free my knee, and I wedge my knee on the floor on the other side. So it's a position almost like we're mounted, except for the fact that my ankle is trapped. And this too forms a strong wedge around my opponent's body. Once again, my upper body wedges the head and shoulders, and my knee wedges the hips. So when Mateus goes to move around, His body is well controlled. And again, all I have to do at this point is free my ankle, which is not a particularly difficult thing to achieve using the methods we'll be looking at. So if there's one piece of general advice that I'm going to give you in the chest-to-chest position, it's this. Put wedges around your opponent's head and shoulders, and then put your knee either on the far side, right here in the pocket of his hip on the floor, or on the far side here, outside the hip, almost like you're mounted. So it's either inside position on the near hip or outside position outside the far hip. If you can wedge your opponent's head and shoulders with your arms in head position and put your knee in either one of those positions on the floor, you're going to have a lot of success passing half guard. So once again, we start off in a half guard type situation. From here, I walk across the body, free my knee, and put my knee on the floor. Now when Mateus goes to move around, it's a very difficult thing. And it's very easy for us in situations like this to get our legs free and move into top position. Conversely, if we manage to free our knee and put our knee here on the floor, now you have control of the head and shoulders, and you've wedged the hips. When he goes to move around, it's going to be a very difficult thing. And as a result, we can simply free our foot and end up with a beautiful pass. So my target, whenever I get chest-to-chest position, is almost always the same. Create strong wedges around the head and shoulders, and then get your knee into one of those two great positions, either inside at the hip or outside on the far hip. And I'll say it again, if you can get to those positions, you're going to find it very easy to extract your ankle and go into a dominant pin and score your points. Now, let's look at a really simple skill to develop, which makes a big difference to your half guard passing performance. You will often hear me talking in this video about the dangers of putting your free knee down on the floor. Okay, let's understand this. If I'm here in half guard, you'll often hear me saying it's a dangerous thing for me just to put my knee naively on the floor here like so. Because now Giancarlo can easily elbow escape and put me back in guard. Okay, so numerous times through the video already, you've heard me talking about the dangers of just naively putting my knee here on the floor with my hips square to my opponent, because it offers so much space for my opponent's knee and elbow to come together, and so easy for him to put me back in guard. So always what I've been preaching is this idea of filling this space between my knee and his hip. We've done it with the fundamental gripping position here, and we've done it with the fundamental starting position here. And they were both methods of closing off that space between my knee and Giancarlo's hip. Okay, if I can fill that space, it's very hard for him to elbow escape. However, there is one time when I do advocate, in fact many people advocate putting the knee down on the floor, and that's in a situation where I don't put it down at the hip line where he can easily elbow escape, but rather putting it down at the shoulder line, which will kill your opponent's ability to elbow escape, and it will give you a very strong, stable structure from which to pass your opponent's half guard. What we're looking to do here is we're looking to take our training partner's inside leg and put his knee on the floor. Okay, I want to pin the outside of Giancarlo's knee to the mat in a way which is going to greatly facilitate our half guard passing. Normally, that would not be a good thing. Here he would simply elbow escape and put me back in guard. But if I can walk my body up to his shoulder line and put my knee on the floor at his shoulder line, it'll become a good thing. Okay, I'll demonstrate this out of the grip we've been making a lot of use of, the lapel crossface, like so. As Giancarlo goes to hold on tight to my legs and makes a strong, resistant body, we're going to start off in our fundamental starting position. I'm going to start walking my body so that my knee comes up to his shoulder line. Okay, so my knee starts at the hip line, and we start this action of tripoding, walking, hold on tight, Giancarlo, and I put my knee down here, right at my training partner's shoulder line, like so. Now, this can create a situation where it's very easy for me to bring my foot inside my training partner's calf muscle. I can also bring the sole of my foot to his knee. Your choice. You can either use sole of the foot on the knee or the ball of your foot on your training partner's calf muscle. And as a result, you can easily pass your knee across to the opposite side of the hip. When he tries to put me back in guard, elbow escape, etc., it's so damn difficult and so easy for us to start a strong passing action. Okay? So once again, whether I use lapel or locked hands, the top head and arm position, doesn't really matter. They're both excellent controls of the head. What does matter is that I get my knee to the floor at the shoulder line where there's no risk versus here at the hip line where there's a great risk of my opponent elbow escaping. So the way we do this, we lock up, we turn our body over to the side, and I start a walking action that brings me up all the way up here to the shoulder line. As my opponent tries to hold on to my leg here, it's very easy for us now to put our foot and just swivel it around and get our ball of our foot inside of our training partner's calf muscle. When he tries to move around now, it's so difficult and so easy for us to pivot past his legs and end up in a very strong passing position. One more time. We start off half guard. From here, we use that back stepping method to get our body moving up towards our opponent's shoulder line. This puts his knee down on the floor. If he tries to elbow escape from here, it's difficult because I'm parked up at the shoulder line and very easy for us to pommel our foot into an excellent passing position where I get the ball of my foot inside my training partner's calf. As a result, I can pin my knee to the opposite hip. So when he tries to work from here, it's so difficult and very easy for us to bypass his legs and end up in a beautiful pin across our training partner's side.
Now, we've been through a lot of details, and I've been advocating to you the use of half guard passing as an autonomous method of getting through the toughest guards. I favor this method of guard passing myself. I was a person who went through my entire jiu-jitsu life with a crippled leg. I started relatively late in my life, at the age of 28, with quite a few physical problems. And so flashy, movement-orientated methods of guard passing were always a challenge for me. As a result, I always strongly favored the use of half guard passing methods, which tend to immobilize an opponent rather than use movement to pass an opponent's guard. This is reflected in the work of my students, who also strongly use and advocate the use of immobilizing half guard passing measures. The big difference of half guard passing is it takes away the single weakest link of conventional methods of guard passing. If I have a training partner down in a supine position, the traditional weak link of most forms of guard passing, I'll demonstrate out of a Toreando pass, but this would be true for almost all the main methods of guard passing, is that it starts at my opponent's legs and hips, okay? So in, say, for example, a Toreando, he gets a hold of my sleeves, for example, makes a strong body. From here, I start with a rotation on my training partner, so I get an angle, okay? And from here, we stand over our training partner, we fight to get our knee inside. Once we get to the initial control of our opponent's hips, I've passed his hip line. The big issue for me now is, how am I gonna manage the transition to my opponent's head? Okay, I've done a good job of getting past the hips, but now I have to shift from the hips to the head, the so-called cranial shift. This is the weak link of most guard passes. As my opponent starts forming defensive frames, it becomes hard for me now to get down to the head. I've passed the hips, I was successful there, but now when it's time to get down to the head, it's so hard to work through those frames, and Giancarlo recovers, and I did half of the guard pass. I did get past his hips, but I couldn't make the cranial shift to the head. That's the traditional weak link of most forms of guard passing, okay? You get past the legs and the hips, and now you've got to fight that second battle for the head, and that's where you run into the defensive frames, and your opponent brings the legs in. This stands in contrast with half guard passing, where the first battle is not for the legs and hips, it's for your opponent's knee. Okay, so our whole thing when we start off with our opponent and I want to get to half guard is to get past that knee. And once I get on top of the knee, we come down, now we go to the head first. Okay, I get control of my training partner's head with some variation of crossface or underhook in order to control my opponent. Okay? Cross-facing underhook, control the head and shoulders. Once we get to the cross-face position, then from here our whole thing is to get past, to get control of our opponent's head, is going to be to free our the knee of our trapped leg and free that knee. Once the knee comes free, you already have control of your opponent's head right from the start with that cross-face and underhook. So that the control of the head comes before the actual guard pass. Okay, there's the head control, and we finish with the guard pass. So the order of operations changes dramatically in the case of half guard. Instead of being a race to get past our opponent's hips and then a transition to the head, so we go hips first, head second, now we go knee first, then control the head, and then pass the guard third. So you see there's a very different order of operations from half guard passing versus conventional or standard methods of guard passing. Because the order of operations is so different, I always recommend it as a separate field of study. It's like a different way of passing your opponent's guard. And the great thing about it is that it removes the weakest link of most forms of guard passing, the cranial shift, because you get a hold of the head first before you pass your opponent's guard. As a result, you can put insane amounts of pressure on your opponent. People talk about pressure passing all the time. I'm telling you now, there is no other form of guard passing that puts as much pressure on your opponent as half guard passing, because the pressure is directly upon your opponent's head and shoulders. Okay, I challenge you to find a more intimidating form of body pressure than a fully locked on lapel crossface. Make a strong resistant body weight. When you start driving in on your training, it's a daunting amount of pressure that gets you past the toughest guards. Okay, I challenge you to find a more daunting form of pressure than a situation where you have an underhook on one side and a head block on the other. As he tries to elbow escape, tries to do whatever he wants from bottom position, the head is just locked in place. Okay, and it's just so hard for an opponent to stop you from these incredibly strong head controlling positions. That, I'm telling you now, is the kind of pressure that melts opponents. There's no other form of guard pass that can match that kind of direct pressure of the head and shoulders as half guard passing. When you want to cook an opponent in bottom position, you can't do better than putting him under the heat and pressure of a solid underhook and crossface game. Nothing else can match it. Because you're controlling your opponent's head and shoulders, there's very little movement involved. Okay, this is the kind of guard passing that someone like myself in my 50s with a hip replacement and a crippled leg, I can do this just fine. If you start me in these positions, I'll put you under pressure regardless of who you are. Okay, I couldn't put people under that same pressure dancing around with toreandos from side to side. I'd get tired quickly at my age. With my crippled leg, it'd be a challenge for me. But half guard is the best friend of someone who's perhaps not the most athletic person, not the fastest person, doesn't have the most experience, doesn't have the ability to change direction quickly and rapidly around the body. These are the kinds of people to whom half guard passing will have a very, very strong appeal. Okay. Now, with that in mind, let's go through what I often refer to as the 4-6-3 approach to half guard passing. This, in a nutshell, is the idea that there are 4 dominant positions. If we can get to these 4 dominant positions, you're going to pass a lot of people's guards. The commonality between these 4 dominant positions is that they are situations where your opponent only controls one ankle with his legs. And it's pretty easy to extract your ankle from these positions. Okay? There are 6 skills that you as a developing student must learn in order to get to these 4 dominant positions and to exploit them, to actually pass from them. So 4 dominant positions, 6 skills to get there and to exploit them. And there are 3 directions in which you pass. If you always just pass in the same direction, you become predictable. And no matter how good your passing is, eventually your opponent's going to figure out and put up barriers. But when you can pass in 3 different directions, straight up the middle to the mount, straight to the side on the near side, and across his body to the far side, you're going to be hard to stop. Okay? So again, 4 dominant positions, 6 skills to get there and use them, and 3 directions of passing. Let's have a look now. I'm going to run you through some movement here and look at how all of these things come together in a natural and organic fashion as part of a half guard passing program. Okay, so the first skill that we must have is we must have the skill of forcing our way to a half guard situation. I demonstrated a bunch of methods. I'm going to show one, happen to be one of my favorites, where we pin a knee to the mat. Okay, it's a natural and easy way to get there. So we start off in front of our training partner. I put my forward leg up to the line of my training partner's toes. I bring my upper body forward, and I catch my training partner at the knee, and I dance out to the side. And as a result, we can quickly come through and into a half guard situation. Okay. The second big skill that we need is to get through some annoying knee shield or scorpions or deep half guard impediments. Okay, my opponent can stop me getting what I want, which is chest to chest contact. That's what I want. He knows that. So one of the best things he can do is throw in a frame, bring a knee inside, and start going to a knee shield. That knee shield is strong, and I can't get through to my chest to chest position. I need chest to chest here. Okay, so we saw in situations like this, it's not difficult for us to get a hold of our training partner's jacket, put his leg up like so, and then from here run his knees and make his knees face up towards the ceiling. Okay, once we get the knees up towards the ceiling, I take inside elbow position. Right now, his knee has the inside position inside my elbow, but when I make the knees face the ceiling, it's very easy for me to get inside position with my elbow. If we were down here on the floor and he has a knee shield, it's almost impossible for me to get inside elbow position. His knee always occupies the inside. Okay, but if I start an action of bringing his knees to face the ceiling, it's so easy. Now when I come back and keep my shoulder low and my elbow and my knee together, guess what? You've got the inside position now. Okay, it's relatively easy under these circumstances for us to start forcing our way into the half guard situation. Always, the key is that my knee goes on top of his knee, so that when we drive forward, now we have chest to chest position. Okay, once we get our chest to chest position, we get into the third skill, which is negating my opponent's ability to off balance me or frustrate me in some kind of way. Okay, the off balances that we face here are easy to state. The first one is the knee lever. If my knee is on the floor, my opponent can knee lever me over and disrupt my balance. If I sit through incautiously, he can bridge up into me and off balance me backwards. If I'm naive with my knee position and I just put my knee out wide, he can elbow escape and put me back in guard. If I'm naive with my arm position, he can take an underhook and then start coming up on his side and causing all manner of problems for me from here. For example, he could just go into a simple roll through half guard sweep and take me right over. Okay? So those are the problems that we face. It's up to us to negate our opponent's ability to use these methods against us. My general recommendation to you is to make use of what we call the fundamental starting position, the FSP. The idea behind the FSP is that if I just start naively on my knees, we're very easy to elbow escape on. So the first thing we do is we close our knee to our training partner's hip, and I occupy the space between my left knee and his right hip. So when he goes to elbow escape, it's blocked. If my knee was open, the elbow escape is so easy for him. So I close the space on the elbow escape. With regards to the knee lever, if my knee goes down to the floor, so easy for him to knee lever me. So I take my knee off the mat and point it out in this direction. Now when he goes to knee lever, it's impossible. With regards to the bridge, if my butt is down naively on the floor and I don't have a sufficiently strong method of cross-facing, it's very easy to take me backwards. So what we want to do is take our body and push across and bring our head down towards the mat. Now when he goes to bridge into us, you have a base of support behind you and your body weight is going against the direction of the bridge. If my ear is over his center line, it's so easy for my opponent to bridge me backwards. But when my forehead comes down towards the mat and we have a base of support behind us, it's so difficult for him to bridge in. When he goes to elbow escape, so difficult. He goes to knee lever, so difficult. He goes to bridge, so difficult. okay? With regards the underhook, he's always looking to get an underhook and come up on his side, okay? Whenever we see this, we use a lateral shift to bring his hip back to the mat. We avoid the temptation to try and cross-face him down, make a strong body. I am never going to take him down with the cross-face, and he can hike me up and cause all manner of problems for me. So our thing here is always to use movement. I bring the body up on its side. I walk across his body, head down towards the floor. This is the lateral shift, okay? I start on one side of his body, and I use movement to shift across and get my head and knee down to the mat. It's safe for me to put my knee on the floor after a lateral shift because my head is on the floor and I have a base of support. When he goes to knee level now, it's impossible. As opposed to here, where it's easy for him to knee level me over. I don't have a head on the floor for base. I don't have a hand on the mat, okay? But when I start that lateral shift across, now we're secure. He goes to knee level, it's not happening, okay? So that fundamental starting position shuts down our opponent's ability to off-balance us. Now, once we've taken away our opponent's ability to attack us, it's time for us to start going into an offensive mode. The thing we're always looking to do here, is the next critical skill, is to free the knee of the trapped leg. As long as my opponent locks his legs above my knee, he controls my whole leg. There's no passing from here, okay? So our whole thing, once we achieve this fundamental starting position, is to get to a situation where we can free the knee of the trapped leg, okay? We investigated a number of effective ways to do this, okay? One particularly effective way is to go across our opponent's body and start to bring our knee out like so, okay? Another one we looked at was to go up and tripoding, like so. And then from here we could use our shoelaces to free the knee of the trapped leg and come down. Another one we looked at was for us to come in and head block, then come up into a tripod and use a thumb post just inside our training partner's knee and shake, 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 and get our knee down to the floor, okay? Once we get our knee free, that's when we can go into our 4 dominant positions, okay? And we saw those 4 dominant positions are the 3/4 side position, okay? Where the only thing my opponent has is my ankle, okay? 3/4 side is only dominant if I have the underhook on this side. If my opponent has the underhook, it's actually dominant for him. He can sweep me here. Grab my leg. And he can easily sweep me from this position. But if I have the underhook on him and I can bring his shoulder towards the mat, it's strongly dominant for me now. And from here, we can go out and kick out. Okay, so that's our first dominant position. Second dominant position, one which I favor a lot. Once we've freed the knee of the trapped leg, is a 3/4 side sit-out position where I sit on my hip and I control my training partner's gi pants, like so, okay? It looks like he can bridge into us, but this incredibly strong lapel crossface and my body positioning up on his shoulder line makes this almost impossible, okay? Now, when I was beginning the sport of jiu-jitsu, we were always taught to bring our knee inside as a wedge. I'm gonna try and convince you don't do this, okay? Why? Because I lose cross-face pressure on my opponent. Now he can cause all kinds of problems. So what I'm gonna recommend is a more modern method of operations where from the sit-out, we don't bring the knee in. All we do is we take our lower shoelaces and put the shoelaces inside his knee. Now from here, I pull with my hands, I push with my shoelaces, and from here, I'm able to kick out. When my training partner tries to bridge up, that lapel crossface makes it impossible. Now we use short, choppy steps to come up to our base. We make his knees point away, and as a result, we can sit down into very, very strong pins across our training partner's side. Okay? So once again, we saw this idea of a 3/4 sit-out position. Okay, well, once we free the knee of the trapped leg, we come down into this position here. My knee right in the pocket of his hip. He locks a tight guard. From here, I put my shoelaces right inside his knee. I push on the inside of his knee, I pull on the top leg, and as a result, we can kick out. Now we take our short, choppy steps to come up
and into a beautiful pin across our training partner's side. Now, the third dominant position that we look at was the idea of a reverse sit out, 3/4 reverse side. We started off by freeing the knee of the trapped leg, and then from here we came out and we took a scapular crossface. That's the best adapted grip for this particular method of operations, okay? And from here, my hand goes close to my own leg and I step over to the other side. Now we work from this position here. Hand grip at the knee, scapular crossface, and I come all the way up to his shoulder line. I don't want to be down here by the hip line. I come up like so. Now I use a pull on the top leg, a push on the bottom leg, and I extract. When he tries to come up on top, that scapular crossface makes it impossible. Now, from here, we come up, pull the man in, lock up, walk the hips away, and end up with a beautiful pin across side. So that's our third dominant position, the 3/4 reverse side. Now, the fourth and arguably the most dominant of the 4 dominant positions, the 3/4 mount position. This is the one I like to see my students use as a default. Why? Because it gives the best ability to switch between the other 3 dominant positions, and it gives us the easiest route to pass in 3 different directions around the body: near side, far side, and straight up the middle to the mount. The key element between around 3/4 mount as we go into our fundamental starting position, the FSP, and we start walking across our training partner's body, we use our head on the floor as base and our hand on the floor as an action hand. Because I'm based on my hand becomes weightless and can go wherever I need it to go. Our favorite place is right there inside the knee. Okay? When my opponent holds on tight to my leg, look how I point my knee at his knee and slip out. I never point my knee forwards and try to horse my way out. I always turn and slip. Don't try to use physical force and just shove. Turn and slip. And as a result, we come up into 3/4 mount. The beauty of 3/4 mount is I can pass straight to the mount using crossface pressure and mounting. I can also go across into one of our favorite positions, the reverse 3/4 side. I can also take an underhook and head block and go across into 3/4 side. I can also take near side underhook, head block, and go across and use my shin to block my opponent's legs, free my trapped ankle, and come across into a beautiful pin across side. Used in this fashion, it's so easy for you to remember the fundamental outline of this procedure. 6 basic skills. First, you got to be able to force the half guard. Second, you got to be able to remove impediments such as knee shields, scorpions, or the deep half guard situation. Third, you've got to be able to assert some kind of fundamental negation of your opponent's ability to off balance you. Okay, you can't have situations where your opponent is just taking you out of balance as soon as you get to the half guard situation. Then we need the ability to free the knee of our trapped leg. Okay, you can't have situations where the lock of his half guard is far up above your knee. That's intolerable. So our whole thing is to free the knee of the trapped leg. If we can successfully free the knee of the trapped leg, then we go into the 4 dominant positions that we're looking for. 3/4 side, reverse 3/4 side, 3/4 side sit out, and arguably, best of all, 3/4 mount. Okay, from those 4 positions, you can effortlessly chain together various half guard passes in all 3 directions: near side, far side, and mount. Used in this way, it's going to be very, very difficult for your opponent to hold off your half guard attacks for extended periods of time. You're going to have a relatively low impact, low athletic requirement method of passing, which will work at the highest levels of the sport: gi, no gi, and even in mixed martial arts.